So Salma, how did you get into politics?
It was purely by accident. 9/11 happened and my world was turned upside down, as were the lives of many people around the world. And we were being told at that time, are you with us or against us, when Bush and Blair decided to attack Afghanistan. And just watching this from my home, I was thinking, how is killing more innocent people going to help the world in any kind of positive sense? And I thought somebody's going to speak up, somebody's going to say the obvious. I didn't hear it, I didn't see it. And then after a couple of weeks, I heard there was some kind of meeting that was happening. So I thought I'd go along to it. And that was the beginning of Stop the War. And I was immediately asked to kind of be one of the leaders. I thought, I've got no experience, not done any kind of politicking. But I felt there was a responsibility to use whatever voice I had. Because when I thought about the Afghan women, I thought they've got no voice. And yet they're going to be bombed with bombs paid by my taxes, because I work in the NHS, and my background is psychotherapy, but I just remember it was the first time I really felt my place in the UK being questioned, because suddenly I wasn't Salma anymore. I was Bin Laden's sympathiser, or all the assumptions that were being made, all the associations.
You thought you were being racialised in a new kind of way?
Oh yeah. And because my generation, it felt like those battles had been won. So my dad used to tell stories about when he went to work and there'd be a pig's head in the locker, or when they used to try and look for accommodation and they came here, the no Irish, no dogs, no blacks that were put in the windows. And so I didn't see those clashes. I was there when the anti-Nazi League were on the streets defending. I feel I was probably the beneficiary of a lot of those struggles. And for me then, it was just a question of do well at school, go to uni, get your degree, work, raise your family. And at that point, I was a young mum and just merrily in my world. And then this happens, and I then came across something very, very different. All the things I thought about Britain being fair, the BBC being impartial, the police not lying. Suddenly it was like, actually, it's very different.
So it was very radicalising, and you quite quickly realised that intimate relationship between racism at home and imperialism abroad. Is that fair? Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, and that's why I was really proud that, the first three the lines of Stop the War, the stances were stopping the war, and then saying stop the racist attacks and stop the attacks on civil liberties. Because right from the beginning, it was clear that the war abroad was going to be used to change things at home, not just for us Muslims, but it would have been that it's clear we're on the front line, but even that attack then will be used on wider society. And looking back now, you can see what's happened. But for the first time feeling obviously like the other, it was after 9/11.
And your parents, were they political at all? Obviously they came over here from Pakistan, I believe.
Yes.
What was their experience politically? Did that influence you in any way?
Well, politically, they were not politically active in any way. The family just voted Labour automatically. That was that. So there's no family history, connections with the kind of political field either here or anywhere else. My mom's housewife. My dad was a head teacher in Pakistan, but when he came here initially, it was in the foundry in Bradford. And then whilst I was a baby, we moved to Birmingham, and he worked in the Royal Mail, the post office. It was about 25, 30 years, that's what he did. So when I started to speak out and, do a public speech, and it became visible, they were really concerned on quite a number of levels. So one was, my dad saying, look, we're guests, so we can't criticise the government. And I remember, saying, well, actually, no, this is our home and this is my government, and I'm speaking as a citizen who's supposed to be able to have a say. I'd taken that for granted. And, I thought, my dad may still feel that, he's a guest. That says something about that generation, but it's also about the sense of confidence in being able to do it. And my mom was like, your kids are young, you can't be doing this. just wait for everything to calm down, But for me, I remember actually showing them a verse in the Quran of all things. Because my dad was practicing. He'd actually started to practice after he came here because he read the Quran and, actually there's something in this. And he used to tell us, we used to be like, oh God, And so I thought, okay, I'm going to use the things he's been saying to us. And there's a verse which says, stand up for justice, even if it goes against yourself or your family, be they rich or poor. And so I said that to my dad, I said to my mum, it doesn't say when your kids have grown up, it doesn't say when your mortgage is paid off, it doesn't say when it's easy for you, it just says stand up, even if. So my dad was like, okay. But he was still concerned about how the community would react, because at that time, I had certainly not seen any woman of colour standing up in that way. There were no clear role models from the South, so it was just going into an unknown space. And I was getting attacks actually from all sides. There were people in the community who were going to my husband saying, how can you allow your wife to stand up and, be so visible in public? So there was that kind of patriarchal nonsense. There were people on the left who were saying, oh, she must be some kind of Trojan horse. She's about to impose Islamism. And so we can't have people like her in the movement. And then I had the brothers, on the other end who were like, she's standing up for democracy. And because I was right from the outset, pluralism, democracy, this is what is precious about what we have, and we have to defend that. And they were like, well, she's not a proper Muslim. And I had death threats from that.
And you had the far right as well, I presume.
And the far right, of course, saying the usual things that, she's not one of us, and I can't repeat the kind of language that was used and actually is still used today, just for me being in the public space and saying things as I feel as they are.
So it seems to me that your parents came here, their story is quite a familiar one for most immigrants.
Yeah.
They had 7 kids?
Yes, I'm one of 7.
And all the children did relatively well, got on, sort of professionally successful. But what you were doing was putting your head above the parapet, kind of undermining in their eyes a little bit the reasons why they came here in the first place, which was to lead happy, private lives and improve, the lives of their children compared to themselves, and that you would do the same and so on. So it strikes me that what you did was a really courageous thing, carrying on through that. And there's an interesting story there about the radicalisation of young Muslims in particular, I think, after 9/11, and the inability of the institutional left then to capture that energy. Can you talk a bit more about how you were perceived within left-wing circles? You said that some people thought you might be a Trojan horse, and that, you were more interested in bringing sort of Islamic values into socialism rather than bringing socialism and Islamic values together.
Well, for me, there was no contradiction. For me, we've got the phrase now, for the many, not the few. Fairness, justice, social justice. These are very natural concepts for me, because whilst my dad was political, he was certainly always talking about fairness and justice. And that's why I kind of didn't get why that was made a problem. And then it became, and as I learned, it was because people had seen what happened in Iran and other countries. And so I was being again made responsible for stuff that happened out there, which I didn't even know about. I know more about it now, and about the kind of different faction fights that took place. But for me, I won't be apologetic about that. And I think if you look at all major faiths, Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, Judaism, Islam, there'll be people who go and obviously have the reactionary interpretation, but there's always, the core tenets, of course, are about peace and dignity and justice. So I don't see a contradiction. At the same time, for me, it's not about putting preconditions on people. I genuinely believe that we have more in common than anything that divides us. And if you're motivated by Marx to do something good, great. If you're motivated by Jesus, great. If you're motivated by Gandhi, great. If you're motivated by Muhammad, peace be upon him, that's how I would refer to him, great. And at the same time, if you want to preach hatred, whether it's the kind of the the white Christian nationalists in America now who use the Bible to legitimize some pretty terrible things. And you see the same people, you know, in Buddhism doing what they're doing to Muslims in Rohingya right now. We're seeing what's happening in India in the name of Hinduism. You know, I know that these great religions don't really stand for that. In the same way, I don't think ISIS represents Muslims or Islam. So a lot of the politics has been distorted and manipulated in the name of religion. But for me, it's like you just unpeel the layers. There's always about the oppressed and the oppressor. Yeah. And for me, the line isn't what race are you, what gender are you, what faith are you. It's, are you on the side of the oppressor, then I'm against you. Are you being oppressed, then I'm with you. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I think it's kind of similar with me. My mum was a Catholic when I was growing up.
Yeah.
And I never really thought I had adopted much of her thinking.
Yeah.
But as I got older, I realised this kind of anger I have to the world as it can sometimes be, very unequal, very unjust. I realised that kind of sense of self-righteousness came from there. And for me, in terms of understanding capitalism, yeah, I'm a Marxist. Yeah. But like you say, in terms of the values which should drive you forward, love for your brother and sister,
yes.
hope for a better world,
yeah.
you know, I think these are at the heart of all the major faiths.
Exactly.
And I don't think that should be discarded. So let's talk a bit more about politics.
Yeah.
You were involved in previous political projects, Stop the War, Respect. Fair to say you've been very consistent in terms of your political values, left-wing political values. Of course, Jeremy Corbyn was involved in Stop the War, still is.
Yes.
2017, you were fighting for a parliamentary seat, but not for Labour.
Yeah.
Now, you're presently obviously running for the nomination for West Midlands Mayor.
Mm-hmm.
One misgiving from somebody who might be watching this, very left-wing, they might say, wow, what an amazing story, what great values, I completely agree. But I don't quite understand why Salma Yaqoob ran against Labour when it was being led by Jeremy Corbyn with a manifesto which was clearly congruent with your own values and the kind of change you'd like to see. Could you perhaps answer that a bit?
I can completely understand it. I will put my hands up and say that was the most stupid thing I've done politically. I'm proud that all the other political calls I've made, whether it's the anti-war stuff, by anti-privatisation, anti-cuts, but I will defend my reasons, not as into justifying, just to explain. So naive, wrong-headed, you know, definitely. At that time, Jeremy Corbyn was under such sustained attack as he is now. Theresa May called a snap election because the hope was that the Tories are going to kind of smash it, Labour would be even more weakened, and the Corbyn project would be over within Labour, because as you're well aware, there's a fight within the party as well as from outside of it. So despite the popularity of him with the members, there's been a concerted effort, coup after coup, as well as the continuing onslaught to remove Corbyn. And at that time, the MP in Bradford had voted with the Tory cuts, was on national television saying that Jeremy Corbyn was not a good leader. And so I thought, for me, it was a place like Bradford, knowing the inner city issues, you know, they're very familiar to me, needing to have, you know, an unapologetically left-wing MP who would stand with Jeremy, who would support the manifesto, not undermine it. That was my intention to go. So I was explicitly standing, yes, as an independent, because I hadn't been allowed in the Labour Party. I'd been trying to join since 2015.
You organised an event actually during the first leadership campaign almost immediately, didn't you, for Jeremy Corbyn?
Totally, straight away, and had 2,000 people coming to it. At that time, no Birmingham City Councillor would come out publicly. I said, will you chair the meeting? You know, didn't happen. You know, so my politics and my values certainly didn't change. On a tactical level, my intention was to strengthen Jeremy Corbyn and the new, you know, this, say new Labour.
Not even necessarily Jeremy Corbyn, this new left-wing
yes.
thing, which was both in and also beyond the Labour Party.
Exactly. And it just so happened that, so that was for me the reason for going there. And I said it explicitly in my campaign, my leaflet said this, and the explanation was there that, you know, if whatever else happens, there will be an MP there, if I get elected, who will vote with, you know, this progressive manifestation of Labour with the Labour Party to strengthen it, not to weaken it. I can understand that that's a long thing to kind of absorb, and you know, people may, you know, project their own kind of reasons to, you know, why, and all the negativity around that. And I'm also proud of the kind of campaign I ran, because it was all about those values. And it was halfway through the campaign that the actual full manifesto was released. And it's amazing, you know, and I'm so proud to be part of the Labour family now, to be able to do that openly and explicitly, you know, as part of the party.
So I'm sure you've heard this far more than I have, but it's a very familiar thing to me. People will say we need more women in politics.
Oh, gosh,
we
yes.
need more BAME women in politics. We need more Muslim women in politics. We need more young people from disadvantaged backgrounds in politics. But then people like you get involved in politics, and the very same people that are making those calls, asking for that change, say, well, not this Muslim, not this woman, not this brown person. How familiar does that sound to you as an experience, both inside but also beyond the Labour Party?
You just summarised my life story. And it's happening right now. So I'm on the long list. I'm standing for West Midlands Mayor to be the Labour candidate. And we've got people who've said all these very same things. We've got a region which is the youngest in Europe,
Yep.
one of the most diverse in Europe. It's not only a case of just that representation of people seeing people like themselves, but actually people who aren't professional career politicians or have been part of the machine, who are going through those struggles, and someone's prepared to stand up and be that voice, not for the machine, but for the people. And so those same people who've been saying that we will represent, oh, somebody hasn't come forward, so we'll represent people of colour, we'll represent women, we'll represent the disadvantaged. It will be an interesting test to see, will they accept having a woman standing? Will they make room? Or will it be the same old, same old? So everybody says we need a new kind of politics. There is a real opportunity here. And already there's a real sense of excitement on the ground. And it'd be a real shame if some of the very people who espoused these values, when it came to them, it's always like somebody else should do it. The test is, what do you do when it's in your gift to do that? When it's up to you to do the right thing, to stand by those values, not just use it as rhetoric, but in action. And I think the test is there, and we'll see.